And like Knack with different power downs as well as just Knack himself, this whole game is a visual mess. It has this like almost quasi-Pixar look to it that just reminds me of Disney Infinity.
Remedy's Control is one of those games where the more I try and take control of the controller and control the main character of Control, the more I feel like I'm losing control of the controller, which I use to control the main character of Controller, despite the fact that I'm getting used to the controls the more I play Control via the controller layout. So let's see if this prequel to Control 2, also known as Control, is a product of Remedy losing control or maintaining control of the Control IP. Okay, I swear I got it out of my system. Spoilers ahead for Control, Alan Wake 2, and slight spoilers for Alan Wake 1 and Quantum Break. Now let's get into this review. I played this game directly after finishing Remedy's previous game, Quantum Break, and what stuck out to me the most was how they switched up their approach to superpowers. I basically summarized Quantum Break's combat as the gun simply being a foundation for time powers and sort of being Remedy trying their hand at an Infamous game. But in Control, I cannot imagine one without the other. The creatively customizable gunplay harmonizes with Jesse's superpowers in a completely frictionless way. A lot of the powers do need to be unlocked over the course of the game, even some essential ones like dodging, but the more you unlock, the better the gameplay flows. And I think the fact that the weapon you use is a plot device helps that a lot. You do only ever use one gun in the game, but the service weapon is a supernatural object that you can manipulate to act like a revolver, sniper rifle, shotgun, or even a grenade launcher. And some of the powers felt a bit unnecessary to me, like the shield, which, to be fair, did come in handy a lot more later in the game, and the seize power. But I really loved how smooth the telekinetic power was, and I was really impressed by the levitation, which is very hard to pull off in video games. There's a reason why the fifth layer of hell is just a CRT TV with a copy of Superman 64. It still has some problems, like how if you don't gain enough altitude at first, you have to land before you can ascend higher, but most of the problems I have with the powers in this game are very nitpicky. Honestly, I was a bit let down by a lot of the key moments in the game though. Like, this game has no shortage of spectacle, but the gameplay doesn't match in these sections. A lot of the time, you're just fighting a bunch of regular enemies and one slightly harder enemy that has a name and a bigger health bar, and while the enemies are very creative and fun to fight, they can get pretty stale in the back half of the game. And let me tell you, when I got teleported by this fridge and saw this eldritch entity beyond my comprehension, I shat myself, but fighting it was super easy and underwhelming. And I know when I say what I'm about to say, a bunch of Control superfans are gonna bash my head against a rock like an ape with a coconut, but the Ashtray Maze is overhyped. All I heard about this game before I played it was the Ashtray Maze. Ashtray Maze this, Ashtray Maze that. It's one of the best things I've seen in a video game in a Remedy highlight. And yeah, for sure, it's really cool and really fun. It's essentially Control's version of the Dark Ocean summoning or the fight at the Old God's farm. But that's it. I was expecting it to be some mind-bending sequence where you're trapped in some ever-changing maze in a hotel or something, and eventually it zooms out and shows that the maze is some shifting ashtray that Trench is putting out his cigarettes in or something, and just fuck with your head. I thought it was gonna be like practically all of the first Alan Wake where you question what's real and what isn't. But it turns out that it's just a section of the oldest house literally called the Ashtray Maze. I was partially right, it's always changing, but it really has no plot implications. It was built up by the fanbase so much that I was a bit disappointed. And I know that isn't the game's fault, but if it was just like the concert at the farm in Alan Wake where I wasn't expecting it and walked into it completely unassuming, I would have adored it. But what I thought it was gonna be in my head was honestly more like navigating the Ocean View Motel and seeing the Dynamite video. And I want to say real quick that I do have a few small problems, like how you keep most all of your progress when you die, but the checkpoints are really far away, but all of my problems like that are really nitpicky. The last thing I want to talk about regarding the active gameplay is how the confusion does not stop at the plot. I thought I was going to grow old and die trying to figure this game out. In my first gameplay session, I kept on almost really liking the game. Every single time I started to get hooked in, some puzzle or encounter would piss me off because of how confusing it is. Then I start to like it again, and then get pissed. All the way up until the stupid fucking punch card puzzle. I didn't even figure it out! It's not even like some of the harder Uncharted puzzles where I understand it immediately on a second playthrough or when I look it up. I still don't understand this puzzle. I tried to figure it out for 30 minutes and then got angry and looked up the answer. And listen, I understand that I am a dumbass. I will wear that on my sleeve until I die. But when it comes to video game puzzles, I judge them relative to the internet. If I understand what I was supposed to do once I look up the solution, then I will concede that I am the dumb fuck, and it was a hard but good puzzle. But I am being 100% serious when I say that if I did not have the internet, I would have never finished this game. Unless I fucking brute forced it and tried 120 different combinations of these 5 damn punch cards. And the confusion bleeds into the open world, which I was equally frustrated by as I was impressed. Control is pretty much an open world game that takes place in the same building. The Oldest House is one big Altered World event that the Federal Bureau of Control has set up their headquarters in, which I think is a rad idea and keeps the places you go all feel connected and diverse at the same time. And it kind of reminds me of the TVA from the Loki show. And the fact that the AWE diverts people's attention and makes them not notice it, and in reality, this is what the New York City skyline looks like, is just ridiculous enough for me to love it. But with such a big and multi-layered playable area, it can be easy to get lost. And this map does not help in the fucking slightest. I still barely know how any of it works. I think the lighter the gray is, the higher the floor is, but when I first started playing the game, I was completely lost, and only found my way later when I started to get more familiar with my surroundings. I still only use the map to get a general idea of where to go and to get a sense of direction. I really hope Control 2 takes place somewhere else, and we get to see Jesse out in the field, because I have no desire to go back to the Oldest House. In fact, both of the DLCs would have benefited from taking place outside of the Oldest House. Not only would it give us something new to see, but it would have made more sense for you to actually go out to Bright Falls and see the darkness there, or physically teleport to the astral plane through some door or something. Especially because they could have just locked it to the post-game. I played through almost all of the Alan Wake content before I finished the game, only to get consecutively fucked by Emil Hartman over and over again, and had to do that boss fight after I finished the story because I was underleveled. And I wouldn't have had that problem if it actually took place in Bright Falls and I couldn't leave until the story was over and the hiss was contained. When it comes to the story though, I am a bit conflicted. I really love the sell and poster concept, which has a great payoff towards the end.
Shawshank Redemption. That's the name of the movie I was thinking of earlier.
I like the concept of the hiss, even though it's very similar to the darkness and isn't very original. I mean, it could be worse. It could be Destiny creating an enemy of darkness called the Taken. And I really like the Objects of Power, which is not only a fun concept, but also provided fun gameplay encounters, albeit confusing when compared to altered items. I love a lot of the reveals too, and how you start to pick up on hints they left for you on a second playthrough. Like when they essentially show you Dylan killed Trench, but you don't have any context and don't understand it first. I shit a brick when it was revealed that two of the main three things we were learning about, the Hedron and Polaris, were the same entity, with different names given to it by different people. Not only did it connect a lot of dots in the story, but it also provided an explanation of how they got the Hedron from the slide projector from the ordinary AWE, and the reason Jesse found the Oldest House in the first place was because Polaris was calling to her. I did find it incredibly confusing though when Polaris Jesse popped up after Polaris died, and had to look it up to find out that Jesse essentially replaced the Hedron as a conduit or generator for the Polaris resonance. Some of the reveals though are a bit handholdy, which Sam Lake did say was intentional as it's a product of that era in gaming, but it seems like Jesse explained the wrong shit. Like, I had to look up what the Polaris Jesse sequence was, but she blatantly tells the player obvious shit. Does Emily Pope know that you can buy Legos at Legoland? I'll keep that to myself. I also do want to say that I am excited for the confirmed sequel to this game, but that excitement isn't very earned. The game ends very abruptly with Jessie just accepting her role as the director, and now Dylan is cured and in a coma. It did have some amazing visuals, but narratively I felt a little robbed. I am glad that they left me wanting more, but we kind of learn in files and through context clues what a para-utilitarian is. We don't learn the correlation between the pyramid and the astral plane, and we still don't really know what the fucking board is. With the former and the Foundation DLC, we kinda have a better understanding, like how they're a group of entities like the former that help the FBC with the AWEs, but we don't know their motivations or why they even help us. And the game always felt a bit aimless to me. In every Uncharted, you're always doing something to get closer to finding the treasure. In Alan Wake, everything you do goes towards saving Alice. In Baldur's Gate 3, you keep trying to find different ways to get the tadpole out of your dome piece. But in this game, I was just doing what people told me for the first half of the game until someone finally told Jesse about Dylan. All of my goals for a long time were merely for the short term. And it certainly didn't help that there weren't any consistent rules. Again, in Alan Wake, it's made very clear that the Dark Presence can make works of art into reality. In the Oldest House, which is basically a pocket dimension where anything can happen, I have no way of knowing what might happen next. The Ashtray Maze is completely expected because you've learned to expect the unexpected. What makes the battle at the farm special is that I'm just making progress and I think I know what's gonna happen next, and then I'm completely blindsided. Now, subverting expectations like that can be hard to pull off, but you definitely won't if you don't even try. Resources are the enemy of creativity, so when anything can happen and there are no rules or restrictions, the game feels less creative and easier to write. But that is a really negative note to leave off on. So I do want to reiterate that I do like the story of Control, but this feels like more of a prologue or a prequel to the real game, and I'm expecting Control 2 to be much more narratively satisfying based on how this branch of the Remedy universe was left off. But while I did have a few problems with the story, I had almost no problem with the characters or the actors' performances. After playing Quantum Break, I knew Courtney Hope was going to turn in a fantastic performance, and I really liked Jessie. It was interesting to see her character progression, like how she didn't want to be called Director at the start, only Jessie. But towards the latter half of the game, she keeps calling Fred Langston by his last name, despite him repeatedly telling her to call him Fred. And as a man with an IQ of 5, I wasn't a big fan of how we're just thrusted into a role as big as Director, as most of the build-up towards it is revealed later. But at least Jessie was just as confused as I was, which kept me from thinking I missed something important. James McCaffrey was amazing as always, and I wish I'd got to see more of Trench, but what I did see was fantastic. And I fucking loved Matthew Poiretta as Casper Darling. He nailed this role. He got the goofy science teacher vibe down to a T, and his almost paternal care for Dylan Faden was really interesting to see play out, and again, I kinda wish I got to see more. His performance was so layered that I simultaneously loved him while also suspecting that he was the real villain the whole time. Seeing his descent as he realizes how little he knows about the Hiss, oh my gosh, he's ripped! I thought it was really creative. It made a lot of sense that the board talked to you by trying to translate astral concepts into English, and it brought a lot of interesting lines, like you/we wield the gun/you. And I didn't want to bring up any correlations to Alan Wake 2, I want to leave that for when I review that game, but after playing this, I feel like I know even less about Ahti. He read Jesse's fucking mind, dude! I thought he was just like some goober in the dark place who liked to go with the flow, but there's something here, man. I only have 2 problems with the characters and the performances, which are that you can really tell when the faces are auto-animated, and they took some notes from Bethesda regarding conversations, where it just keeps cutting between 2 very similar shots of the characters talking, but those are pretty nitpicky problems to have. Now that I've played most of the Remedy developed games, and am at least caught up on the Remedy connected universe, I do definitely think that this is a solid entry into this developer's catalog. One thing I love about these games, Control included, is how Remedy isn't ashamed of their history, and fully embraces it like the 665 code, but still retains enough individuality to not make it feel like a nostalgia fest. Control did have a lot to live up to, and I don't like it as much as everyone else seems to, but I will definitely be playing the sequel. Before I give out the score, I want to remind you that I am not IGN, where anything below a 7 is trash. 0 is worthless, 10 is a masterpiece, and 5 is impressionless. Definitely not good, but definitely not bad. So with that in mind, I'm giving Control an 8 out of 10. It does have room for improvement, and I was kinda over it when I got to the side missions, but I did end up getting the platinum, and it is better than a lot of other games I've played, especially once you get into the side missions like the fridge. So in the end, I guess it turns out that Remedy, developers of Control, really did have control over Control when Control